religious kid, and it was Southern Pentecostal Church of God, like snake handling adjacent. Like, we didn't handle snakes because we weren't crazy, but we were pretty close. I knew I was gay in the 2nd grade. That's how long I've known. I told a friend I had a crush on her, and this little snitch told my 2nd grade teacher at a Christian school, who then sat me down and told me I couldn't like girls because it would send me to hell. And in 2nd grade. And I'm friends with her on Facebook, and I don't think I have to tell you who she voted for. Sorry. 2nd grade, yep, that I would go to hell, and that is where my religious trauma begins. And it didn't help that I have been in ministry since I was 15 years old. So 10 years of ministry. Okay, you didn't laugh at that. Good job, guys. 21 years of ministry, kids, youth group, young adult, outreach, worship, women's ministry, you name it, I was involved in it in some way. From the years 2010 to 2017, I served in a church in Cape Coral. By the time I got enough sense and enough strength to lead, I was leading leading 2 ministries, youth and young adults. I was playing on the worship team, volunteering in children's ministry because my best friend was the children's coordinator and didn't always have enough volunteers. So in a week, it was rehearsals, midweek service, Friday service, Saturday kids, youth or women's events, lock-ins, concerts, retreats, all the things. And I never stopped doing. And I was working 40, 50, 60 to 70 hours a week at the hospital, because when you take call, 9 to 5 isn't a real thing. So I was burnt out. And I'm not sure if you caught on, but I never said I was the youth pastor or the young adults pastor or that my best friend was the children's pastor. We were leaders and coordinators and facilitators. And I asked the pastor of this church about this, and I said, why can't you call us pastors? And to my face, this man said, women cannot have that title. This is 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 8 years ago. Women cannot be pastors. Now, Nicole of today would have stood up, said an explicative that rhymes with duck poo, and walked right out. This pastor was telling me in word and in deed that I had the strength to be a leader, but I did not have the agency or independence to be a pastor. My breaking point for leaving that church was in 2017. I can't believe it took me that long. But you don't know the guilt and the compulsion you feel to just keep doing until you've experienced the guilt of, well, this is what God has called you to do. God spoke to me about this. You can't step down from youth group. My breaking point was when the pastor asked me to preach. I got it right the first time. And I'm so sorry. I didn't even mean to cuss that time. I wasn't on purpose. Well, he asked me to preach, and of course I said yes because I love to preach, because I was also preaching for him and filling in. And then a week before that Sunday comes, he tells me I have to lead worship too. And silly little old female me asked why. And it was so that the pastor could take the newly hired male pastors on a pastor's retreat to plan the vision for the church. About 2 months earlier, he had hired an outreach pastor and a worship pastor. Wasn't room in the budget to give me gas money to get back and forth from Health Park, but we hired 2 men, and the new worship pastor and his assistant, all going on this pastor's retreat to talk about the vision of a church I had been giving my blood, sweat, and tears to for 7 years. 7 years. And when I brought this up to him, when he got back and I asked for a meeting and I sat down in his office and I asked him, why did I not get to go on that? Why was my voice not heard at that? And the response I got was, it was a pastor's retreat and you're not a pastor. Strong enough to lead, but not strong enough to be a pastor. Powerful, but a power that he had control over. And I have so much more I could share. But my point in all of it is that it's not just a handful of preachers preaching bad theology and getting negative PR for it. It is an idea that is baked into the theology and beliefs of churches all across this nation. I have lived it. My life has been damaged because of it. And so this series isn't just to hit political talking points. It's a personal thing that is happening every single day. And we have been silent. We are not speaking up. Not for people of color, not for women, not for the LGBTQ community. We have been silent. And so tonight, I titled my sermon, Two Tamars, One Gospel. And we're going to start with the Tamar in Genesis. And this is a wild story. I'm reading from the New Living Translation tonight, not because it's the most accurate and best translation, but because of the content. Like, I read some of it, and I was like, I don't know if I can say that word in church. It's in the Bible. I did just call a man an aster, so I don't. All bets are off. But before we read about Tamar, I want to bring you up to speed of where we're going to be picking up. Tamar is a Canaanite woman who is married to the son of Judah. Does that name sound familiar to people in the room? Judah. It's a pretty important name, one of the 12 tribes of Judah from which Jesus comes. He had a son named and he was evil, and consequently, God killed him. Now, I don't know if God really killed him or if he just died from something stupid, and they said that God killed him. So in following the Jewish law, she was given as a wife to his brother Onan, and he refuses to have a baby with her and deliberately disobeys the law. So what do you know? He dies too. We're going to pick up in verse 11. When Judah says to Tamar, his daughter-in-law, go back to your parents' home and remain a widow until my son Shelah is old enough to marry you. But Judah did not really intend to do this, because he was afraid his son would also die, like his two brothers. So Tamar went back to live in her father's home, and some years later, when Judah's wife died, after the time of mourning was over, Judah and his friend Hira, the Adullamite, went to Timnah to supervise the shearing of his sheep. Someone told Tamar, look, your father-in-law is going to Timnah to shear his sheep. Tamar was aware that Shelah had grown up, and no arrangements had been made for her to come marry him, so she changed out of her widow's clothing, covered herself with a veil to disguise herself. Then she sat beside the road, the entrance of the village, which was on the road to Timnah. Judah, Tamar's father-in-law, promises her to give her a husband. Remember when, I don't know if you remember when I spoke about baptism, but I think we all have been listening to me long enough to know that women's value was found in a man. A husband, a son, somehow a woman needed to be married to have value, to have protection. And Judah promises her that he would do that, never follows through, because he believes that Tamar is cursed and doesn't want his last son to die, because of course it's the woman, right? Because there's no way that wickedness was the common denominator in all this. It was obviously Tamar. And so now Tamar is twice widowed, childless. So right there, she has no value, no protection, and she's cut off from all of it. And she's in a world living where her worth, her value was held in a man's hand. So in verse 15, Judah notices her and thought she was a prostitute. Since she had covered her face, like that's all it took was a veil. Oh, prostitute, got it. So he stopped and propositioned her. Let me have sex with you, he said, not realizing that she was his own daughter-in-law. I'm sorry, guys. How much will you pay to have sex with me? This is in the Bible. How much will you pay to have sex with me? Tamar asked. I'll send you a young goat from my flock, Judah promised. But what will you give me as a guarantee that you will send the goat? Tamar asked. Well, what kind of guarantee do you want? He replied. And she answered, leave me with your signet, your cord, and your staff. So Judah gave them to her. Then he had intercourse with her, and she became pregnant. Afterwards, she went back home, took off her veil, and put on her widow's clothing as usual. And for centuries and centuries and years and sermon, Tamar has been dragged through the mud because of this verse. Judah noticed her and thought she was a prostitute. She never claimed to be a prostitute. Was that her intention? I don't know. We can't know that. But it doesn't matter. Because Judah's assumption becomes the narrative. The story is told that Tamar deceives him in believing she was a prostitute so that she could seduce him and commit incest with her father-in-law. She caused him to stumble. She made him look at her. She was asking for it. See, this woman, when left unattended, can be manipulative and conniving. This is not the way a Proverbs 31 woman should behave. But the text, the ink on the paper tells a different story. Because according to the law Judah followed, she was owed something. Tamar was owed something by Judah's house. But his son Onan defies the law on purpose. If you want to know exactly how he defies the law, go read Genesis 38. Judah lies, has no intention of making sure Tamar is married to his last son. And she was purposefully and without remorse cast aside, overlooked. And then for centuries, she's been made to be the villain of this story because she seduces a righteous man. Ignoring the fact that written on the pages in scriptures, Judah initiates this encounter. He saw her. He assumed what she was, and he asked for it. And then she saw an opportunity, and she took it. And he hands over his signet, his cord, and his staff. Like, big whoop, right? Like, she gave him his shillelagh, whoop-de-doo. But what Judah gives to her, what he hands over, is the modern day equivalent of a birth certificate, a photo ID, and a social security card. Is there anybody that you would give that to for any reason? Ever? No. He gave away his proof of his authority, of his identity, and proof of his family line. Why? Why would he do this? Why would he give this away? Because Judah, once again, assumes, you know what they say when you assume, it's really bad. He assumes that she is disposable. He'll get what he wants, bring her back a goat, and he'll get his belongings back. No one will ever know. No one will ever know what I did, where I was. But Tamar goes home. And when Judah's wingman goes back to get his identification documentation and asks the temple, hey, where's the temple prostitute? They're like, bro, this ain't that kind of place, man. We don't have prostitutes. And he goes back to Judah and be like, I can't find her. And Judah's like, well, what are you going to do? We'll just have to see what happens. I'll call the government and get another one, whatever. And then in a few months, when Tamar's pregnancy becomes obvious, the family tells Judah, Tamar has been acting like a prostitute and has gotten herself pregnant by another man. Again, with the prostitute. Why? Are they accusing her of being a prostitute? Purity culture. You're pregnant. You must have done something wrong because you can do that all by yourself. It's like, that was that joke that it just like rolls once you figure it out. And so what does Judah do? He calls for her execution because she broke the law. Getting pregnant outside of Judah's line was against the law. So she broke the law. Let's execute her. He actually says, burn her. And this queen, man, as they're leading her to execution, she's like, hold up, fam. Look what I got. And she said, the man who these belong to, that's my baby daddy. And Judah was like, oh, those are mine. those are mine. And what he actually says is, she is more righteous than I because I deceived her. I dropped the ball first. And so they bring her back into the family, and Tamar doesn't just have one baby boy, she has two baby boys, which kind of feels like a clapback from God. Like, she was childless with no babies, now she has two babies. Now we're going to talk about the other Tamar. And I am going to give just a little trigger warning for everybody, because this story in 2 Samuel is much darker, and there is sexual assault in the story. If that is something that you are not comfortable with, I will give you a moment to leave. But this is I'm just going to be reading the scripture. The R word is used in scripture. So if this is not for you, no judgment. But I just want to make sure everybody is on the same page of what's coming. Because the story of Tamar in 2 Samuel, like I said, is much darker and has a much more devastating ending. And this is a story that is probably what more women identify with or see parts of their story in. Tamar is the daughter of King David. Because King David had so many wives, Tamar has brothers and half-sisters. And Tamar has a half-brother named Amnon. And we're going to read 2 Samuel verses 1 through 2. And Amnon, her half-brother, fell desperately in love with her. Amnon became so obsessed with her that he became ill, and Amnon thought he could never have her. And I feel like it should say, and then King David said, absolutely 100% correct, my son, you cannot. But it doesn't. What it does is it tells us a story of how Amnon and a friend come up with a plan for him to get what he wants. And what actually happens is Amnon pretends to be sick and requests that David send Tamar to take care of him. So after Tamar spends time preparing a meal for her sick half-brother, he sends all of his servants away and asks her to come feed him in his bedroom. While she's feeding him, he tries to convince her to sleep with him. And she says, no, can't do that. It's wrong. It will bring shame and dishonor on our family. We're royalty. We cannot do that. And of course, he said, you're right. Thanks for the soup. See you around. Verse 14, it says, this, you've got your trigger warnings. This is the bad verse. But Amnon wouldn't listen to her, and since he was stronger than she was, he raped her. And then suddenly Amnon's love turned to hate, and he hated her even more than he had loved her. Get out of here, he snarled at her. This is not a misunderstanding. This is not a moment of weakness. This was a violent, premeditated, calculated assault. And she pleads with him not to be sent away. Don't send me away. That would be even worse than what just happened. And when she wouldn't leave, he calls his servants to throw this woman out and lock the door behind her. But now Tamar tore her robe and put ashes on her head. And then with her face in her hands, she went away crying. Once again, someone is robbed of their identity and their position. Her robe wasn't just some fancy garment or fancy clothes that she got to wear because she was a princess. It was who she was. It's how the world knew that she was King David's daughter. And when she tears her robe, she's grieving for what's been done to her, but grieving because she knows that what was stolen cannot be given back. And the gut punch of the whole thing is in verse 21. When King David heard all of these things, he became very angry. But he would not punish his son Amnon because he loved him and he was the firstborn. Her father, the king, does nothing. to protect himself, to protect his son, and to protect his throne. There was no punishment for Amnon, no comfort for Tamar. There was no justice. There was only silence. And she disappears from the story, not because she wasn't strong or not because she lacked courage, but because the people around her lacked conviction. Her story does not end with silence because Tamar didn't speak. Her story ends with silence because the people who had the power to protect her, to save her, to vindicate her, chose not to listen. Two Tamars. One fights for justice and wins. The other suffers injustice and is silent. Both of these women are named. That is rare in Scripture. For men, women, that is rare for someone to be named. Both of these women are part of the story that leads us to Jesus. All the bad stuff, trigger warning stuff is over. So if people who stepped out for that would like to come back, I'm about to really preach. I told you I was Pentecostal. In Matthew 1, it's one of the most boring chapters of the Gospels, but because it's a record of the ancestors of Jesus, the Messiah, a descendant of David and Abraham. Judah was the father of Perez and Zerah, whose mother was Tamar. This is a record of the ancestors of Jesus, the Messiah. Judah was the father of Perez and Zerah, whose mother was Tamar. The Tamar of Genesis should not be there. She was a Canaanite woman who was widowed twice, accused of prostitution, but yet she is named in the lineage of Jesus, the Messiah. She's representing every outcast, every woman and man and misfit who had been misjudged. She is representing the silence. Because Jesus didn't come through a perfect and sanitized moral lineage. Jesus came to this world through a messy and broken, scandalous list and stories of misfits. Two Tamars, there's one gospel. One fights for justice and one is denied it. One names herself through action. One is renamed through her trauma. One gives birth to the line of Jesus while the other bears its brokenness. And here's the thing that I don't want us to miss is that the Tamar of 2 Samuel is part of the family of Jesus. Jesus did not just come from a woman who fought the system and won, but he also carries the trauma of the woman who was harmed by that same system. He carries the courage of Tamar in his blood, and he works and he fights for justice and inclusion, making sure every voice is heard, but he also carried the trauma of Tamar in his soul, living in the very same system that harmed her and that wanted him dead, that wanted him silenced and forgotten. And this is the beauty of the gospel, that it's not just for the victorious or the strong or the independent. The good news of Jesus' love, inclusion, grace, and mercy is that it is also for the violated, for the silence. It is for those who have been denied justice and their place at the table. One birthed the Messiah, one bore the cost of a broken system, but both are part of the gospel. Both are who Jesus came to love and serve. It was silence that broke Tamar, because David chose his son, his throne, and his power over justice. And that is why this series is being done. Because we cannot undo trauma, but we can refuse to be another David who looks away and be silent. We can refuse to be another David who looks away and stays silent. I shared my story and I shared these video clips to show that there is harm being done and being spoken and being believed. It would be one thing if these clowns were just out there saying it to people on the internet to be trolled, but people are believing this. Women are believing this. Men married to women are believing this and forcing their wives to submit. I'm not trying to stir the pot, but Refuge is a church for people who need people. And what a lot of people need is for people to stop being silent. Judah, in a rare moment of humility, said, "She is more righteous than I." Judah was a man who had power. So he could have called her a liar. No, she stole those things from me. No. She took those from me while I was asleep. That's not true. She's a liar. She's a thief. Execute her. But instead, he stopped. He owned his failure. He used his voice, and in doing so, he saved her life. And that is the kind of voice that I want us to have. That's the kind of church I want us to be, not perfect, but present. We're never going to have the right words, but I never want us to just have an empty silence. This series is about breaking our silence. And you're probably like, Nicole, I'm just me in my very little bubble of Fort Myers. How am I supposed to break silence? You start with your story. This happened to me and I'm still here. I was a victim of a misogynist pastor. And I'm still here, chasing Jesus, chasing my call, being for people what I needed 8 years ago. Naming our pain in safe places, it gives other people permission to name theirs. Silence starts to break when someone's brave enough to go first. Start with your story and believe people when they speak. Silence is broken when we stop questioning other people's pain and we just honor their story. We honor where they've been, what they've been through, the pain and the garbage that they've gone through to get to here, and we listen. Create many safe places. Not everyone is going to grab the mic. Not everyone likes to be the center of attention like me. But they will talk over a free cup of coffee or around a table or a pan of lasagna or in a living room. Silence breaks in circles long before it starts to break in crowds. Silence starts to break in little circles before it starts to break in crowds. And this is a big one. Call things what they are. Abuse is abuse. Misogyny is misogyny. Racism is racism. Hate is hate. Stop ignoring the things and speaking out against them. Someone at work makes a racist joke, you call them out. Call them out. Every time we name what others refuse to, we chip away at the silence and we chip away at the systems that keep us silent. So to close tonight, I'm going to share with you a closing liturgy. And as I read this, would you just listen to it? You can close your eyes. You can meditate, whatever you need to do to help absorb it. I do have it on the slide, so if reading helps you kind of process things, you can read along with me. There is a silence that protects, and there is a silence that oppresses. Too often the church has chosen the second. Quiet when it should have spoken, still when it should have moved, and complicit when it should have confronted. We confess the times we've protected power over people, the times we've shushed the story because it made us uncomfortable, the times we watched pain and said nothing, but today we choose another way. We follow the God who listened to Tamar, who walked with Hagar, who wept with Mary, who heard the bleeding woman before he ever saw her face. We will believe survivors. We will honor their stories. And we will create a safe space for grief, rage, and holy disruption. May our words bring healing, our presence bring safety, and our church become a place where the silence are heard, the hurting are held, and the wounded are no longer alone. God, I pray that we would live these words. We would become the people that people need, that we would break the silence and love people. Do justice and follow you. We worship you tonight. We thank you for what you're doing. God, I'm so thankful for what you're doing in this church. I pray that you would continue to strengthen us and allow us to be independent misfits, to break the silence and cause a holy disruption. We love you and we worship you. In Jesus' name, amen.